Hey, how's it going, Mark?
Hi Dan, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, thanks for partaking in this mock interview. So this mock interview, as you know, is based on Amazon's business intelligence engineer interview. And as you know, the Amazon's BI engineer interview asks a myriad of things, consisting
Mm-hmm.
of leadership principles,
Mm-hmm.
SQL, and some product business cases, correct?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. So in this mock interview, this is about 30 minutes. Primarily, we're gonna only focus on the product, basically the business case part, and along with the SQL question. And
Mm-hmm.
the duration of the entire video itself is about 30 minutes, and we'll spend about like 15 to 20 minutes just going through the questions, and then I'll spend about 10 to the remaining time of that 30-minute block, basically giving
Mm-hmm.
you some solution along with feedback that's going to be really helpful for your upcoming interview. Does that sound good with you?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay, awesome. All right. So, and just before I start, for the viewers out there who are watching this, definitely check out datainterview.com. Datainterview.com contains courses such as A/B testing, business case problems, A/B testing course, probability, and there's much more content that's going to be uploaded very soon, which I'm really excited about. And also check out the coaching service if you want to mock interview style like this. Whether you have an interview coming up for Robinhood, Meta, Google, you name it, any round, any role. I can definitely personalize an interview prep just for the interview that's coming up for you and give you really good feedback that's going to be really helpful for your interview skills. So definitely check out datainterview.com. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jumpstart a coder pad and we'll use that to basically go through the questions together. Sounds good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. All right, Mark. So the first question I have for you is the following. Imagine
Mm-hmm.
you are building a dashboard for Amazon's executive team. Using the data tables below, the customer and transaction tables, what metrics would you
Mm-hmm.
display on the dashboard?
Gotcha. Would you mind if I can take a quick minute to read through the table schema?
Absolutely.
So we have two tables. One is customer grant tables that contains the customer ID and transaction ID. The other one we have transactional data set, include different items, transaction ID and sales. Um, yeah. So I think for the first questions, it's like as a BI engineers, how do we really use the data we have at Amazon, and also come up with some metrics that will help Amazon leadership team to make sure the we are building a product that satisfy customer. So before I jump to the matrix, I just want to be clarify what's the business goals we are trying to achieve with this data, and so that will help me to brainstorm some metrics.
That sounds good.
So I think the business goals based for executive team mostly based on the transactional data. We want to know first of all from the customer side who are can we use this data to segment customers.
Hmm.
Then we can identify like a VIP customer or most loyal customer and differentiate like one-time buyer from customer with repeat purchases. And then secondly, I think from the product team, they can get an understanding of what are like I say like a top 10 items like a top sellers along with the number with the like what are top 10 best sellers. So let me try to put some notes here. So I think the business goal is like a understand like a customer shopping patterns, and like a identify like a say VIP customer. And then secondly, like a oh, let me and then also like a product performance over time. Um, does that make sense to you,
Yeah,
or
sounds good.
anything else you want me to elaborate more on?
No,
Um,
sounds good. Yep.
cool, cool. So, I think the next step with these two goals in mind, I will start listing out some of the metric I think that might be helpful for our leadership team. Based like a customer, I will treat the first goal as like customer segmentation. So in terms of like a segmentation. I think one of the company use analysis is like a RFM, basically like a understand what's the recency, frequency, and monetary value for a customer, so we can like add like a segment this user based on their behavior. So with that being said, I will like a an analysis. So some of the metrics I will look at is like a number of orders over time, and then also number of order value over time, and then like what's the like a recent order date, um, and then so but for the we have to put a like a statistical function here. So first given time, total number of recent most recent day, and then like a recent RFM, and then for the second goal, like a product performance over time, what I can think of is like a for each item, what is the maybe we can return like a top 10 best seller uh with like a sales with with the most sales and the most transactions. So yeah, does that does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want me to add or add more details to?
Yeah. So I noticed that you're particularly focused on more about the volume, but what about on the monetization side of this?
Mm-hmm. Monetization.
Yes, the revenue.
Um, sure. So from the monetizations aspect, I think like a yeah, I think that's a great co-op because another thing I can think of is like a average order size. Basically just like a what is the how much a customer what is the average amount of dollars a customer spend with Amazon, and then how large is the cart size. So I will also to other than the total number of the order value, I will also look at average order size or like a cart size because I think one of the goal for the RFM analysis is to increase the customer lifetime value.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, is that sufficient, or you want me to think about other metrics?
Yeah, so I'm just going to assume that it's good enough for now. So
Mm-hmm.
based on the metrics you have listed, can you try to
Mm-hmm.
prioritize them? So actually just pick
Mm-hmm.
your top three and then prioritize them in the order of importance.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, um, if I need to like a pri
So that's the next
so
question for you. So I'm
okay.
actually going to just paste it right here. Yep.
Okay, cool, cool. Thanks. So we list out a couple of the metrics and then how do we really rank the metric based on importance. So I think here's I will be focused on the RFM analysis. So in that which means that I will uh, pick like a recency which is the like a more recent like a last recent order date, and then for the uh, frequency, I will look at the total uh, number of transaction given a time transaction given a time window. So here we should specify like a what's the time frame for the analysis. Usually we will do the RFM analysis on the quarterly basis. So here I can say over the like a last 4 months, over the past 4 months, and then lastly is the what is the? Give me a second. Let me write it down. Okay, like a uh, monetary. Basically, it's like the like a average average order size. It can be let me copy paste here. Yeah, I think that would be the. Should I rank all the metrics? Just pick the like a top three metric I think the most important.
Yeah, so top three is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So now among the top three, suppose that you have to just pick one metric that
Mm-hmm.
really is like representative of like the type of dashboard that you're building, right? So imagine this would be the type of metric that you would display at the very top of the
Mm-hmm.
dashboard. Using that metric, can you pick out what that metric is? And as part of that, based on the most important metric that you picked out, can you write an
Mm-hmm.
SQL solution of that?
Sure. So, mm, I think it really depends on like because originally I think that these three matrices are important, and then so like a but like in terms of just if we can just only pick one matrix, then I will think of maybe I should optimize the monetary value because Amazon try to increase the size of the card so that we can um, uh, earn as much as money from the customer and providing the best customer service. So in this case, I will choose like a monetary as the metric I will put on top of the dashboard. Um, sure. So I can start or writing the SQL. So in order to calculate the monetary value, like a order size, we first need to determine how to calculate the like average order size. Um, average or typo. Sorry, average order size. I think this is the sum of sum of the sales divided by uh, number of the transaction ID. Um, does that sounds good to you? Um,
Hmm.
cool. So once we have the definition for the matrix, then I will. So basically, I will treat the transaction tables. Let me see. So average order size. Let me take a. Um, Let me take a moment to think about solar exact. Um, so another thing like I will put is the by date because the goal is to show the trend or seasonality of these metrics trending over time. So I will calculate the average order size by day so that like leadership team can know like for example if we launch a promotion campaign like whether it's actually impact the customer shopping behavior, which in turn increase the average order size. So I will calculate this metric by date. Okay, cool. So let me, I will treat the transactional table as the main table, and then left join the customer table. Uh, Based on the transaction ID. And then I need to first to pick the C or and then aggregate the number of the uh, sum of the C dot sales as uh, some like count distinct transaction ID because I want to know how many transactions happening on a daily basis, count uh, orders, right? Then total sales, and then so let me see for order. Mm, then then we just need to divide these two numbers and showing the so like a for each. Oh, I forgot group by. And then so basically for each day the total sales divided by customer. So I think sorry, one thing I want to clarify, um do we want to show the matrix at customer level or just basically show the chart or like a time series plot for the leadership team, or is like
Well,
a
so that's a good
table with a
question, but I
customer?
think that's for more on you to kind of figure out what would be a reasonable unit of analysis. Do you think it
What's the
makes sense
unit?
to do it just at the time level, or do you think it makes more sense to do it on a much more granular, which is per time, per user level?
Users. Um, I think it makes more sense that we can um do the analysis at customer level because like a we talk about we want to identify customer VIP customer or loyal customer, so maybe like having the customer uh level informations then can provide more details about which customer perform the best over the time, because right now otherwise we just see the like a numbers but without understanding what's the story behind it. So yeah, does that sound good to you?
Okay, proceed.
Cool. So then I will have the customer ID from the customer table. Then by each day for each of the customer ID, I will calculate what are the sums of the total sales and then the number of the number of the orders, and then so which I can mm, customer ID some, and then I just need to order date, and then customer ID, and then count just like total sales divided by count order. Oh, yes. Should I average the add transaction ID first, and then yeah, times one. So basically, just like a card size. Um, customer ID front end. Yeah. Let me double check. So by date and customer ID, I will um first, maybe I should, because like I assume we have like a million, thousands of millions customers, so it doesn't make sense to show all the customer, uh, uh, show all the metric for each of the customer. So I will order by the card size, and then just like a for each day, I will monitoring the like a top one customer, which is our like loyal customer, and then to show what's the trend about customer behavior. Yeah. Did you have any comments, or am I on the right track, or anything you want me to add more details?
Yeah, can you just like walk through your SQL solution from the beginning to the end? So what is it that you're actually striving for, and then like how does this logic actually help you get the metric that you're proposing here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just walk through the logic.
Cool. Sure. So I think based on what we discussed, we will pick the monetary as the like a key metric to monitor. So I think the first step, I first to aggregate, take a sum of the sales, and then count the number of the unique transaction ID at order date and customer label. So for each day, per each customer, we know how much money they spend with Amazon, and then how many orders they placed. And then after we create a summary tables, I basically just, because the matrix is average order size, so I divide the total sales by the number of the orders, so I can see what's the average order size um, for each day and for per customer. But because the assumption I have is we have like millions customers, so it doesn't make sense to show that on the dashboard. So I order by the cart size. I just show what's the top 100 loyal customer, what's their average cart size over time. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. All right. So that is the end of the question portion. Mark, just a quick little summary. What was your experience about this question?
Um, Sorry, give you a summary of the.
Yeah. How did you feel about this question set?
Mm-hmm. I feel about this is actually a it's pretty close to what BI engineer is working on day-to-day job, because a lot of time leaderships will give you a very ambiguous problem, and then BI engineer's role is to really translate these business problems into into either SQL queries or like a technical specification. So given these ambiguous problems, how do we really
Hmm.
identify the logic for each of the metric we are caring about, and
Yeah,
also write a SQL to answer the business questions. So yeah, that was my experience.
got it.
Cool.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for the input. Okay, so now let's go through the assessment portion of this. So starting with the first question,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to paste the assessment here down below in the quarter pad. So actually, let me actually paste it right here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so starting with the first question, I would say like overall, you had a really good structure in terms of how you were approaching this. So you started out by basically elaborating the business goal of this problem, right? You didn't
Mm-hmm.
just dive into, hey, here are the metrics I think would be meaningful. You started with the background information, and then you list the metrics. So I think that's a really good framework that you use to approach this problem, just because this is a business case problem, and so the
Mm-hmm.
interviewers are often assessing to see whether you can approach a vague problem, sort of like what a consultant would do, which is starting with
Mm-hmm.
some clarifying questions, establishing the frame of what that problem focus is, and then diving into the actual technical solution of it. And so it's a really good thing that you had a really good structure in terms of how you were approaching this.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing that I want to mention is, um, I really liked how when you were providing the details about the business goal, you talked about a couple important details such as, like understanding the purpose of building this dashboard is to be able to understand shopping patterns. Um, and I think you initially mentioned like identifying, VIP customers and, product performance over time, right? So I think those are really good things
Mm-hmm.
that you mentioned in terms of what the business goal is. Um, Now, this is where I also have some suggestions about a couple things here. So the first suggestion that I want to mention is that I noticed that you were just right off the bat kind of listing metrics that could be useful. But
Mm-hmm.
I think a really good way to approach a situation where you have to list multiple metrics is start by
Mm-hmm.
thinking about potential categories or areas that you can explore. And then populate the area with specific metrics that you can use to basically represent what that area means. So for instance, instead of just being like, okay, I'm going to have some metrics focusing on total number of orders over time, total number
Mm-hmm.
of order value, most recent order day, and so forth. Start with some groupings, such as like, okay, I think a really good way to basically so Amazon's executive team, they want to understand at a high level where the e-commerce is going over time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's going to help us understand, like what would be a meaningful strategy in a longer term horizon, like the next quarter, next year, and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based on
Yeah.
what has been the historical trends over time. So based on that, you can start by some logical grouping, such as, okay, I'm going to have a set of metrics focusing on
Mm-hmm.
monetization,
Yeah.
order volume or transactions, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
and customers. So right off the bat, that kind of simplifies your thought process in terms of the type of metrics that you can provide. So instead of just being like, okay, I'm going to list 7 to 8 metrics, rather I'm going to start with some 3 areas and then maybe have 2 to 3 metrics per each of the area. That makes
Mm-hmm.
it a lot easier for the interviewer
Yeah.
to follow. And it's also going to help you brainstorm metrics a lot quicker. So this is actually something that I recommend to a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
clients and those who are watching this video right now. That's really how you should kind of approach these type of situations where you need to list metrics. Start with the logical grouping and then list specific metrics.
Mm-hmm.
The second suggestion I have is clearly establish the unit of analysis. So when you're saying over time, it's a little bit vague because like are you referring to per hour, per day, per week,
Mm-hmm.
per month, per quarter, per year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And depending on who the audience is and what the purpose is, you would end
Yeah.
up picking a different unit of analysis. So, for instance, we're talking about Amazon's executive team, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, would they really care about daily sales volume, or would they care more about monthly or quarterly, a longer term horizon? What do you think
Mm-hmm.
is a lot more meaningful, daily or
I think the
monthly,
longer,
monthly slash
like
quarterly?
a monthly or quarterly, that's what the leadership team will care more about. Like,
Right, right.
yeah.
And that's because when they're making strategies, right? They're doing it at a longer term horizon, right? They're not saying, okay, we're going
Mm-hmm.
to optimize tomorrow. That we're not,
Mm-hmm.
we're, what they're strategizing is, how can we increase the revenue by 10% the
Mm-hmm.
next month or the next year, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense to broaden up the horizon from daily to a monthly level.
Mm-hmm. Daily to monthly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Two grand.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the third suggestion I have is I felt that, so I understand the idea of using RFM, but in this case, I felt that it was a bit too specific. So for those
Mm-hmm.
who are watching, RFM stands for Recency, Frequency, and Monetization Framework. And it's a common framework as a way to basically segment customers meaningfully based on the recency of their purchase, based on the frequency of the purchase, and the monetization value of their purchases. So you can sort of imagine like you can segment users who are the most loyal customers of Amazon, and
Mm-hmm.
there's various applications to this where maybe you could send out um, like some sort of like a credit for loyal customers, or you can also use it for like marketing purpose, where if you see that there are a subset of users who are just not purchasing things as much, maybe we can target those users that have been extracted from RFM analysis. So that's actually a really good framework to use whenever you're addressing a question of like, can you segment customers meaningfully, right? So that's a really good
Mm-hmm.
framework to use. However, for this case, I felt that this was way too granular, just
Mm-hmm.
because the executives wouldn't necessarily focus on the individual type of customers. Rather, they're more focused on the top down. So that's actually a consistent theme that I sort of mentioned across all the
Mm-hmm.
questions. Is that when you think about the dashboard here, you really need to think about top down analysis. You start with the most important, the big number, right? And ideally, that big
Mm-hmm.
number is somewhat representative of like the type of numbers that an investor is going to see. So these are the type of numbers that you would see in
Mm-hmm.
Amazon's 10K 10Q. The total volume, sales, the number of
Mm-hmm.
volume, the number of active users. Those big numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's much more embodying of the type of metrics that should really be there on the dashboard, in the most important to the least important. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so I like that you were very specific about the type of metrics that you're going to provide, but in this case, it was just way too granular.
Mm-hmm.
This is much more. It would be much more meaningful for, let's just say, the product management team or like the marketing team, but for the executives, we're talking about VPs, and
Mm-hmm.
so I just felt that this was way too granular, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. I think. First of all, thanks for all the suggestions, and then it makes sense. And then um, I think, one of the takeaways that I should keep in mind who is the audience to this dashboard. For example, this is for executive team, so we should focus on like a big numbers, like high level metrics as opposed to like a too granular matrix like a daily volume, order volume, or transaction. So I think that's a one mistake I made, but I think that's all. I really appreciate all the advice. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And for those who are watching, definitely this is a really good exercise. Whenever you stumble upon questions like, how do you measure success or how do you define some sort of metrics, um, think about how your response is going to be different depending on who the audience is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whether it's for the executive team or product managers or product marketing managers or engineering managers, you're going to have a different set of metrics tailored for different types of audiences. So that's a really good exercise as a way to cultivate your product sense skills. All right, so the next question is, similar feedback as I have about the first one, which is once again, this is just a bit too granular. So, for instance, like
Mm-hmm.
the last recent order date, well, considering that there's millions of transactions that are happening on a daily basis, you're always going to have the most recent date, right? It's essentially just going to be the current date that's going to show up on the in your top metric list, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't really be the most meaningful there. And the second suggestion I have is I think what should have belonged in your top three is basically the total sales per month, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the main KPI for Amazon, which is because by nature, what it is they're selling goods, right?
Yep.
So the most important metric in this case, should have been total sales per month.
Mm-hmm. Total sales.
And moving on to the third question. All right, so I would say that this was somewhat between inadequate and good enough solution.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. It's not that you had any issues with the query itself. There's two aspects to this. One, what was the metric that you picked? And two, how did you write that solution? Okay? So let's start with the first one. So the first focus being, this was a bit too problematic overall. I mean, the idea of looking at the average order value per customer per date, once again, is just way too granular, and you're
Mm-hmm.
gonna stumble upon sparsity, right, of this data
Yeah.
because you're looking at individual customer and then you're looking at their behavior on a daily basis. I mean, some people might purchase things on a daily basis, but I would imagine that most likely it would be sort of like a once a week sort of thing or twice a week, right? So you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
a lot of 000 and then some dollar value, 000, some dollar value, right? So
Yeah.
that's just going to be a bit too problematic in terms of the type of metric that you're picking. So I would have really just gone back to what is the big number, right? The big picture number.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in that case, it should really have been total sales per month. And so in that case, the query should have been really simple. Just take the transactions, do a
Mm-hmm.
group by on on the monthly value of basically that timestamp, right? And then take the
Mm-hmm.
sum of the sales, and then that should have just given you, a very simple solution, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in terms of the metric that you ended up picking, it was a little bit too sparse and too
Sparse.
specific.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing, in terms of how you wrote the solution how you wrote the SQL based on the metric you picked was somewhat problematic. So one, um, I don't know why you decided that you're going to count the distinct transactions. So I didn't quite understand why you couldn't just take the average of the sales for the date per customer. Why did you have to count the distinct transactions
Mm-hmm.
um, and then basically divide that total sales by the count orders? If you're just trying
Uh-huh.
to understand what is the average, basically what is the average transaction value uh, per customer, why not just do that?
Yeah, because I think based on what I see in the transaction table, for example, the transaction 454345, there are three items in the with the same transaction ID. So if I didn't use the discount, um so I think my initial thought is like I need to sum all the sales for each transaction ID, and there are multiple transaction ID in the table. So I just thought that would be some duplicate if I
Got
didn't
it.
use a distinct function. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So if that is the case, that's perfectly fine. Um, but I think just in this case, I think a just much
Yeah.
more simpler
Yeah.
query would have worked, which is just basically just taking the average,
Average sales.
yeah, basically the average,
Yeah.
transactions value per customer per day. If
Yeah.
since I think that's much more sort of embodying instead of just trying to
Yeah.
do it at the order level, which I think would have just kind of confused the audience even more.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So all in all, I mean, I think in terms of the communication, I think it was really good. You were really easy to understand. So just definitely continue your communication style in terms of how you're approaching the interview. Um, and in terms of like how you're picking up the metrics, always think about always start with like the top down analysis, right? So think
hmm
about what the big picture is, and then work your way down, right?
hmm
Um, and then the third thing is when you're writing an SQL solution, don't try to overcomplicate things, right? Just
hmm
pick out that one simple metric, and then write a simple solution. Like, don't try to add extra things as a way to like make it
Yeah.
kind of unnecessarily confusing and complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I hope you enjoy this mock interview. I definitely enjoyed working with you, and I look forward to work. I look forward to more things like this in the future.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. And I really appreciate all the suggestions and advice. It was a great exercise. Thanks.